Hey friends, my name's Mitch. Wanted to do a review of Operation Dauntless from GMT Games. Absolutely amazing game. You'll see this comes with quite a lot of stuff for your money. So I paid $38 for this as of this filming. A price may go up or down, but you get so much good stuff in this game and it's so awesome. I just wanted to do a quick review of it. So this is game design Mark Mugzinski, according to Google Translate. Sorry if I butchered that. If I did, blame Google Translate. This is Roger McGowan, 2015. So let's review the contents of this beautiful game, and we'll start with the documentation. So it comes with 4 books. One is a rule book. The rule book covers only the rules. It's very dense. Only 36 pages, and this game is rated fairly complex, but the rulebook is 36 pages. That's fairly short for a high complexity game. The reason is because it's very dense, pure rules. So it goes into all the different types of things that you get into, from anti-tank fire, zone of control, and the rules around that, combat, etc. And the reason I say it's dense is because they moved most of the stuff that you would find in the rule book to these other books, which is pretty handy, because if you need to reference a rule, you can quickly go to it without having to sort through all of the extra errata and the different reasonings behind the rule and things like that. So the second book you get is the playbook, which is samples of play. And you can see this is absolutely stunning. So beautiful, beautiful book for samples of play. This is 25 pages. So as you flip through here, it will give you from the starting scenarios type samples of play, combat with support, range attack table results. It'll have examples, etc. So you can see this comes from the the Vassal module, so not the actual game. So it has a bunch of different historical graphics. It has graphics right from Vassal. All of this stuff is well written, well explained, and everything is just well done overall. Nice, glossy stock, easy to read. Everything is perfect. So again, this is just the scenario examples. So if you're kind of curious how range attack plays out and you want to see a sample, you can come here and you can see that sample. So again, there's tons and tons of things in here. So if you're confused about how one rule interacts with another rule or something like that, chances are you can come into here and get a good example of it. Because I know a lot of times we don't have examples of play, so we end up having to hit Board Game Geek and hope that somebody posted something and things like that. So it's great to have this additional documentation. Again, playbook. So the third book is the reference book. Now this covers not only from a historical standpoint how the game was designed or why a certain rule exists, but he'll go rule by rule or section by section. So like ranged attacks or anti-tank fire or things like that. He'll go section by section and explain why that rule exists, what actually happened historically to make the reasoning behind that rule. And they actually, not only did they go, let's say, historical maps, Google Maps, etc. They actually went on site and mapped out the area and tried to fill in the blanks for if they're confused about how certain terrain would interact with another terrain or vehicles on this or that terrain. They actually went on site and did their research. So not only books, not only historical documents, not only maps, Google Maps, etc. They did quite a lot of work to explain why rules exist and etc. And this is 48 pages, And this is fairly dense as well. It's not a dry read. It's not just dry history or, just historical fact after historical facts. It's actually really cool. So he talks about, let's say he wanted to make a certain rule or a certain flow to the game go one way, and then they play tested it and it didn't work out, and then they referenced a historical book on it, and it turns out it was completely different than what they thought. And so they modified all the rules to accommodate that, or they modified the game board or the map or maybe the information on the chits to accommodate. Maybe this tank didn't have as much range as they thought it did, or maybe this particular vehicle moves faster than what they thought it did, etc. So it's really interesting stuff. And this is probably my favorite book out of the four because it's just so interesting. And this brings a very visual, imaginative component to the game that you don't have in a lot of other games. In other words, a lot of other games, I'm just pushing chits around. I'm grabbing the chit, I'm pushing it around. Okay, it's infantry, here you go. It's a tank, here you go. But this book brings it all into perspective. All of a sudden, I'm really familiar with that particular tank, or I'm really familiar with this set of infantry, because I know this set of infantry had all sorts of problems when they encountered this other set of vehicles or whatever. So it's really, really interesting. And all of a sudden, the game just bursts to life. It becomes not just a game, but all of a sudden you feel like you're in history playing it through because of this reference book. This is my favorite one, 48 pages. It goes like that. You'll have no issues getting through this. You'll read through this in one sitting. And finally, obviously the scenario book, what you're mainly interested in, a massive 48 pages of scenarios. This is incredible. You get, a lot of games they'll have like 10 scenarios. There's like 48 pages of scenarios. It has beautiful pictures. It has all sorts of other special rules, things like that. And the chits are not overwhelming. There's not that many chits compared to a lot of other games. I mean, there's not like 3,000 chits. So it has nice pictures in it, beautiful glossy pages. Really, really, really like this scenario book. This is one of the best. I would say Unconditional Surrender would be probably my second favorite scenario book after this one. This is so stunning. It's just so nice. And it flows so well. It's easy to understand what chits you need. It's easy to find those chits. You put them on the board. The board's not that big. Wow, just love it. I just adore this scenario book. It's really, really nice. You get tons and tons of scenarios. Not only these scenarios, but you get tutorial scenarios to start you out. So let's take a look at the map real quick. It's under Plexi, but gorgeous green map. And you can get the mounted version for an extra $20 if you're interested. But, I mean, all the details are here. It's easy to read. It's pretty. It's not huge. It's not the table eater. So, I like the map as well. And I did order the mounted map. I'll do a separate unboxing sort of review for that. So, now let's take a look at the chits and everything else. So, now let's take a look at the chits. Comes with about 1 tray's worth of chits. However, I split it into 3 because I want to be able to grab the particular platoon I'm interested in very quickly. So if you want to do that, it's about 2.5 trays. So I went the OCD route. However, you don't have to do that. You could probably jam the whole thing in if you go tight in a tray or a little overflow of 1 tray. So these are the British units. And if you take a look at close-up of the chits, let's do that now. So here's a close-up of the chits. Pretty standard layout for this level of complexity game. I do like the graphics on them. I think it represents them quite well. You have a lot of different colors from orange let me point with this. You have from orange to red to yellow, white. You have some that have a black border around it, etc. So you do have the German units and the British units displayed here. So they do have a lot of information in them, but it's not too much information. So I like the graphics that they added to them. So it's not just a tank. You can sort of see the type of tank from the picture. And if it's a transport, you can see the type of transport, etc. So I like the chits. They're not super thick. They're not pre-rounded. You do have to clip, but they're not too thin. I've had a couple of games where the chits were just ridiculously thin, but these are not too bad. Here's a sample of the thickness of the chits. So overall, I think they're pretty good. These are going to last a while. And they are double-sided. Some units do have a flip side, and other units do not. So some units have a transport side and versus a non-transport side. So here's a flip side of that. Your pretty standard white bar in the middle of it, etc. So pretty good quality chits. Pretty happy with those. Not extreme. It's not like, let's say, the No Retreat series, but it's not too bad. Again, here's the thickness. So let's take a look at the extra stuff you get, and I'll give you my conclusion at the end. So the rest of the stuff is pretty standard. You get tutorials, so beginner tutorials, how to attack with infantry, and then assaults. So assaults are really cool. It's like 1 hex against 1 hex. And you can do it in 0 visibility. Zone of control goes out the window. A lot of extra rules associated with it, but if you really want to pack a punch, assault is the way to go. These are not the same type of assaults that you get in other games like Unconditional Surrender. These are different. So very cool. And there are playthroughs of assaults and all these scenarios on YouTube. I'll put a link with a channel Counterattack. That guy's awesome. So here you have more stuff. Fire from the Hilltops with Armored Units. Armored Units Part 3. And then Fields of Fire, Armored Units Part 1. Getting Started Armor. So you get a lot of tutorial scenarios as well as the playbook where you can go and look at stuff. And then you get Armor Reaction Cycle Flowchart. So, fairly complex game. So, but once you get grooving with it, it's not that big of a deal. And then a vehicle identification card, along with a campaign game setup card, which is kind of cool. And again, here is the vehicle identification card. And then you get your standard information track, turn tracks. So here is an information turn based track. And your turn track for June, mid-June there. And then for late June, there's your turn track B. So turn track B. And if you want to see it, pause the video. And turn track A. So you can see the LOS changes based upon time of day. So sometimes you will be using assaults versus not using assaults. If you don't have much visibility, you're kind of stuck with assaults. Then obviously your player aids. Here are optional rules that you can use if you're interested. Again, the game is complex. You pretty much need to tackle the basics before you jump into the optional rules. It will be a while before you're ready for optional rules. And standard player aid cards, CRT, your combat modifiers, unit recovery for when they're damaged, replacements, and your tactical advantage modifiers. Then your terrain effects chart. Anti-tank fire tables, modifier chit, survivor tables, counter rotation, what to rotate when, based upon used units, not used units, British carrier platoons and scout platoons rules. Ranged attack table. Ranged is interesting in the game. It's a bit different than most. They have friction fire instead of opportunity fire, so you can read up on that. All the manuals are available online as well. And ranged attack modifiers. And then finally, obviously your setup cards for the British and the Germans. Part 1 and Germans Part 2. So in addition to all of this, there's a ton of pictures and more information and more historical documents and more documentation on GMT's website. Link down below in the description. Take a look at that. But overall, I would say this game is utterly fantastic and a must-buy. It is just amazing in every way possible. Everything about this game is cool. It's fun. It's entertaining. It has so much beef to it for the amount of money you paid. A lot of times I pay quite a bit of money and I get a game that just doesn't have much depth, but this one is quite intense. So overall, I rate it extremely high. It must buy for me. I'm very happy that I bought it and it was well worth the money. So I'm Mitch, and that was my look at Operation Dauntless.